Part 1, Prologue, The Phantom in the Trenches. Content: establishing the contrast between man-made death, war, and nature-made death, pandemic. In 1918, the world was in the final throes of the war to end all wars, World War I. In the trenches of France and Belgium, mud mixed with blood and barbed wire, humanity believed they had witnessed the ultimate horrors: mustard gas blinding soldiers, steel tanks crushing flesh, and artillery fire that shook the very foundations of the earth. At that time, death had a concrete shape. It was the muzzle of the enemy's gun on the other side of no man's land. But at that very moment, a colorless, odorless entity, invisible to the naked eye, silently made its landfall. It glided through troop decks, crawled into cramped bunkers, and followed the breath of soldiers returning home. It killed faster than any Vickers machine gun. It did not distinguish between friend or foe, nor did it care for national ideals or military glory. Within months, this silent killer turned war cemeteries already overflowing into massive mass graves that no gunfire could match. Why has history forgotten the true victor of World War I? Why could a virus strike down robust young men who had just survived the bullets at Verdun in less than 24 hours? Part 2, Origins in the Cantonments, History's First Lie. Content: detailed analysis of the origin in Kansas, USA, and why the name Spanish is a historical injustice. History often begins with a lie, and the name Spanish flu is a prime example. In reality, the virus did not originate on the Iberian Peninsula. Modern epidemiological evidence leads us back to March 1918 at the Funston Military Training Camp in Kansas, USA. Imagine a camp packed with 56,000 soldiers, where the stench of thousands of war horses mixed with the arid dust. Albert Gitchell, an army cook, was the first recorded patient with mild flu-like symptoms. But within a week, 500 others had fallen. Why was it called the Spanish flu? The answer lies in politics and censorship. Waging nations like the US, UK, France, and Germany imposed strict press censorship to maintain fighting morale. They did not want the enemy to know their armies were weakened by disease. Only Spain, a neutral nation, reported truthfully on the outbreak when even King Alfonso XIII fell ill. The world, hungry for information, seized the reports from Madrid and branded the killer Spanish. The silence of the great powers was not just a military tactic, it was an epidemiological crime, allowing the virus to spread silently across continents without any defense. Part 3, The Power of Paradox, the biology of the cytokine storm. Content: in-depth explanation of why healthy young people died fastest, the key to the horror of 1918. Typically, the flu is a bully to the weak, the elderly with exhausted immune systems and children with underdeveloped ones. But the 1918 virus was a cruel biological paradox. It targeted those aged 20 to 40, the most vigorous labor and fighting class. Modern medicine explains this with a deadly term, the cytokine storm. When the H1N1 virus enters the lungs, it triggers an extreme inflammatory response. In young people with overly robust immune systems, the body overreacts. The immune system deploys every chemical weapon to destroy the virus, but accidentally obliterates the fragile lung tissues as well. The lungs become flooded with fluid and blood. The victims did not actually die of the flu. They drowned on dry land. Their skin turned a deep bluish-purple cyanosis due to severe oxygen deprivation, and blood leaked from their noses, ears, and mouths. This is the most gruesome image of 1918. Young soldiers who were marching heroically one day, only to be found motionless the next, their faces blackened by suffocation. Health, once the pride of youth, suddenly became the Achilles heel that caused them to collapse before this invisible foe. Part 4,
1918,
A World in Convulsion,
face
the collapse of society and faith.
A global
Content:
the
describing the
force,
collapse of the healthcare system,
like
funerals, and crowd psychology as the pandemic swept through cities. In the autumn of 1918, the second wave, the deadliest wave, swept across the globe like a tsunami. In Philadelphia, a historic mistake occurred. Despite warnings from doctors, the authorities held a massive military parade with 200,000 participants. Just 72 hours later, every hospital in the city was full. People began to die so quickly that funeral services collapsed. Horse-drawn hearses were no longer enough. Garbage trucks were used to collect bodies from the streets. Fear transformed people into strangers. Faith in religion and government was severely shaken. Citizens began to doubt everything, from wearing masks, which were often mocked, to half-hearted lockdown measures.
Changes daily.
In San Francisco, the Anti-Mask League was formed a classic example of human resistance to freedom restrictions, even when death was imminent. Scientists at the time didn't even know viruses existed. They were still struggling to find a bacterium as the cause. The helplessness of medicine pushed society into the darkest despair, where kindness was replaced by extreme survival instincts. Part 5, Human Stories Amidst the Pandemic, Giants and the Anonymous. Content: exploring the impact of the disease on those who changed history and the pain of ordinary families. The pandemic was not just about statistics. It was about the people who did and could have changed history. US President Woodrow Wilson fell ill right in the middle of the Versailles peace negotiations in France. Historians believe the high fever and flu-induced delirium exhausted him, causing him to lose the mental strength to oppose the overly harsh terms imposed on Germany, an indirect factor leading to German resentment and the later rise of Nazism. But what about the anonymous? These were the young nurses called the angels of the trenches, who worked 20 hours a day in field hospitals filled with the smell of chemicals and death. They held the hands of gasping soldiers, comforting them with gentle lies about home, only to fall themselves hours later. We look at families in remote rural areas where parents and children lay dead on the same straw bed because there was no one left to care for them. These fragments show that the 1918 virus did not just kill bodies. It tore through the emotional fabric and legacy of millions of families worldwide. As the virus faded in 1919, the world seemingly wanted to forget the nightmare as quickly as possible to celebrate military victory. But for medicine, 1918 was a great turning point. It forced humanity to acknowledge that pandemics are a matter of national security. The collapse of the private healthcare system that year gave birth to the concept of socialized public health, where governments are responsible for monitoring and suppressing pathogens. In the 1990s and 2000s, scientists undertook strange historical expeditions, exhaling bodies from the Alaskan permafrost to find the genetic code of the 1918 virus. They successfully reconstructed the virus in a lab to understand why it was so brutal. The legacy of 1918 is the birth of global pandemic surveillance organizations and a massive push in vaccine technology. The greatest lesson is, in a connected world, a fever in a cantonment half a world away can become a global catastrophe in just weeks. Our greatest enemy is not the virus, but human arrogance. Looking back a century later, the images of masks, quarantine orders, and field hospitals from 1918 do not look unfamiliar to us today. History has an ironic way of reminding humans of their smallness. The 1918 Spanish flu was a brutal test that cost humanity 50 to 100 million lives to learn the lessons of preparedness. It reminds us that no matter how far technology advances, we remain biological creatures vulnerable to the random mutations of nature. We look back at the past not to live in fear, but to build a necessary humility. The deaths of those soldiers were not just numbers, they are mirrors, reflecting the fragility and also the extraordinary resilience of humans. I am Tim, and we respect history by never letting it be forgotten. For a people that forgets its past is condemned to repeat it. I'll see you in the next era.